From the outside looking in,
right?
We just decided not to tell the world.
But how am I judging
everything?
Because I was trying to rush something seemingly?
You weren't trying to rush anything. You were trying to talk about.
But what you didn't know was we were married before the ceremony.
The hardest truths are often the ones people quietly suspect, but never hear spoken aloud. For years, Bishop Noel Jones and his wife have been the subject of endless discussion, speculation, and curiosity. Many believed they understood the story. Few knew what was happening behind the scenes. Now, after years of silence, she is finally sharing her perspective. And what she reveals isn't just about a relationship. It's a confession, darker than the weight itself. The truth behind the viral story. In the last few weeks, the internet has been on fire with one of the most disturbing stories the gospel world has seen in years. Headlines have been everywhere claiming that Bishop Noel Jones, the 75-year-old pastor of City of Refuge Church in Gardena, California, collapsed in the middle of a sermon. Videos have been racking up millions of views, claiming he was rushed to the intensive care unit at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles with his wife sobbing beside the stretcher. TikToks have been making rounds claiming a secret handwritten letter was found in his study. Posts have been spreading claiming a leaked voice memo proved he knew he was dying weeks before the collapse. Whole channels have been built around the claim that a succession war broke out at City of Refuge, while the bishop lay unconscious in a hospital bed. And the comment sections under every single one of these videos have been flooded with grieving viewers leaving prayers, leaving condolences, leaving long messages about how much his ministry meant to them. None of it actually happened. Bishop Noel Jones did not collapse in his pulpit. He was not rushed to Cedars-Sinai. There is no leaked voice memo. There is no handwritten letter sitting in a safe under his wife's supervision. There is no succession war breaking out at City of Refuge. Every single one of those stories traces back to artificial intelligence content farms churning out fake news to harvest clicks from people who love the bishop. Not one legitimate news outlet has reported a collapse. The church itself has never confirmed it. The bishop's verified social media has never addressed it. But here is where the story gets interesting. While the internet was busy mourning a man who is still very much alive, his actual wife was quietly doing something the gospel world had been waiting for her to do for almost 3 decades. She was finally telling the truth about the weight. She was finally confirming what every pastor's wife in America had been suspecting about that marriage since 2013. And what she said about why it took 28 years to put a ring on her finger is the real story the algorithms should have been chasing all along. The confession heard across the gospel world. You have to understand the kind of woman Loretta is before you can understand the weight of what she said. She is not a podcaster. She is not a YouTuber. She is not the kind of first lady who goes live on Instagram every other day and tells her business to whoever happens to be watching. She is a chef trained at the Art Institute of Culinary Education. She is the owner of a boutique called Loretta's Couture. She is a quiet woman who built a quiet life around a very loud man. So when she finally opened her mouth and addressed the question every pastor's wife in America had been asking about her for nearly 3 decades, every word counted. She did not pretend the wait had been easy. She did not paint a fairy tale that nobody who had watched Preachers of LA would have believed anyway. She said her view of marriage had shifted during the years she spent with Bishop Noel Jones. She said she had not always wanted a wedding the way the public assumed she did. She said something in her changed along the way. And then she said the part that hit the hardest. She said if he proposed, she would accept. Hear that sentence again, because it is heavier than it looks. She was not saying she had been waiting at the door with her hand out. She was not saying she had been counting the years and crying into pillows. She was saying she had stopped chasing the ring a long time ago. She was saying she had built a life that did not depend on his decision. She was saying that if it came, she would say yes, but she was no longer waiting at the window for it to come. And that is the part that finally explains everything. The reason the wedding happened in 2022 was not that she finally won him over. It was because she had finally let go. She had finally reached the place where the ring stopped mattering more than the woman in the mirror. And when a woman lets go of needing a man to validate her existence, that is almost always the exact moment the man realizes he is about to lose her for good. There is a kind of silence women learn after years of waiting. It is not the silence of a woman who is okay. It is the silence of a woman who has decided she will not beg anymore. The people who knew Loretta best say she reached that silence somewhere around her late 40s, and she lived in it for the rest of her life. She kept showing up at church. She kept cooking. She kept running her boutique. She kept smiling for the cameras when they pointed her way. But inside, something had quietly walked out of the room. And Bishop Noel Jones, the man who had quoted the Apostle Paul for almost 30 years as his shield against commitment, finally felt the temperature change in his own house. That is when he proposed. That is when he finally made it right. But the road that led him to that altar, the wound that kept him single for so long, started in a place that has almost nothing to do with Loretta and everything to do with a divorce nobody in the gospel world talks about. The wound that started it all. To understand why Bishop Noel Jones moved the way he moved in that relationship for 28 years, you have to go back to a small town called Spanish Town in St. Catherine, Jamaica. He was born there on the 31st of January, 1950. His father, Bishop Robert W. Jones, was an apostolic clergyman and a politician, the kind of man who carried a Bible in one hand and authority in the other. His mother, Marjorie Jones, raised 7 children in a house where the Word of God was law and softness was rare. Noel was one of those 7. His older sister was a girl named Beverly Grace Jones, who the world would later come to know simply as Grace. The same Grace Jones who would grow up to become a model, a singer, a Bond villain, and a global icon of 1980s pop culture. Brother and sister grew up under the same strict roof, ate the same food, and answered to the same disciplinarian step-grandfather after the family relocated to the Syracuse area of upstate New York in 1965. Grace has hinted at a childhood that was not gentle. Noel himself has spoken in sermons about what his official biography refers to as the enduring of early childhood abuse. He has never explained it in detail. He has never written a tell-all book about it. But anyone who has ever heard him preach knows the way he talks about pain, the way he talks about discipline, the way he talks about men who hide behind God to avoid being known. He was called to ministry at the age of 19. He attended Anon Bible College, a school run by the Pentecostal Assemblies of the world. He took his first pastorate at 26 in Longview, Texas, at a place called Bethel Temple. And then, in June of 1994, he stepped into the pulpit at Greater Bethany Community Church in South Los Angeles. That same year, his marriage of more than 2 decades to a woman named Ruth came to an end. He had 3 children with Ruth, Noel II, Tiffany, and Eric. He had grandchildren on the way. He was a divorced bishop in his mid-40s, starting over in a city that has no patience for losers. And right in that season, right when the dust of his first marriage had not even settled, he met Loretta. Some sources put their meeting in 1992. Others say 1994. The exact year does not really matter. What matters is that he walked into that relationship still carrying the shrapnel of a divorce he had never publicly explained to anybody. He had watched one marriage come apart in the middle of his ministry. He had 3 kids who had just lived through it, and he had no appetite for risking another covenant that might collapse on him in front of his congregation. That fear, more than any theology about the Apostle Paul, is the real reason Loretta spent the next 28 years waiting for a ring. But fear was not the only thing standing in the way of that wedding. Because somewhere in the middle of those 28 years, a story broke that nearly buried both of them, and Loretta had to make a decision about whether to stay or go that almost nobody in her position would have made. The allegation that hung over the house. In the summer of 2012, a tabloid called Radar Online ran a story that nobody in the gospel world wanted to read. The story claimed that an X Factor singer named Stacey Francis had a daughter named Anastasia Noel Jones. The story claimed the father of that child was Bishop Noel Jones. The story quoted Francis saying she loved him very much, and she was not ashamed of her baby. Their baby. The internet caught fire within hours. Pastors who had never met Noel Jones suddenly had opinions about his bedroom. Bloggers who specialized in church scandals dug up everything they could find on him. And in the middle of all of that noise sat Loretta, The woman who had been with him for almost 2 decades by that point. The woman who had no ring on her finger. The woman who suddenly had to read tabloid headlines about a man she shared a bed with and another woman's baby. Stacey Francis went on Twitter just days after the story broke and denied she had ever admitted to any affair. She said she was never interviewed by anyone. She said she never made any such admission. Her later quote, the one that floated around the internet for years afterwards, was a careful non-confirmation. She said she loved him and she was not ashamed of their baby, but she never said who him actually was. Bishop Noel Jones never responded. City of Refuge never released a statement. The story was never confirmed, and it was never denied with any real force. No DNA test was ever made public. No court record ever surfaced. The allegation just hung there in the air, like a coat on a hook that nobody in the house wanted to touch. And the woman who had to live with that coat in her closet for years was Loretta. She never spoke about it on camera. She never called Stacey Francis out on social media. She never went on a podcast and cried about it for clout. She just kept showing up. She kept cooking. She kept running her boutique. She kept walking into church with her head up and her file in place. And the people closest to her say she made a private decision in that season that explains everything she said after the wedding. She decided that if she was going to keep waiting, she was going to wait on her own terms. She decided she was not going to be the woman who got chased out of her own house by a rumor she could not even fact-check. And she decided that whenever Noel finally got around to making things right with her, he was going to do it in front of the same cameras that had been broadcasting their non-marriage to the public since 2013. The cameras of preachers of LA. The only reason those cameras were still rolling by the time the wedding happened in 2022 is because of a friendship Bishop Noel Jones has been protecting for almost 40 years. And that friendship would soon teach him something about mortality that no sermon ever had. The brother who almost did not make it. Bishop T.D. Jakes is the closest thing Bishop Noel Jones has to a brother in the ministry. They have preached together for decades. They have vacationed together. They have prayed for each other through divorces and scandals and seasons of public criticism. When Noel decided to join the cast of Preachers of LA in 2013, the very first person he called was Jakes. He told an interviewer at the time that Jakes did not love the idea but supported him anyway. He also said something in that same interview that nobody paid enough attention to until much later. He said he had been out of balance for most of his life because of what he does. He said he had to learn to say no. He said you cannot go everywhere and you cannot help everybody. 11 years later, that warning came true in the worst way possible. Not for Noel, for Jakes. On the 24th of November, 2024, Bishop T.D. Jakes collapsed in his pulpit at the Potter's House in Dallas. He was in the middle of preaching a sermon when his face went still. His body slumped. The entire stage froze. The video went viral within hours. The world thought he was gone. Months later, in late March of 2025, Jakes finally told the whole story on NBC's Today Show. He sat down with Craig Melvin, and he said he had suffered a massive heart attack from a blood clot. He said if he had arrived at the hospital 5 minutes later, he would have been dead on arrival. He said the right side of his heart had completely stopped getting blood. He said he had been preaching that day with half of his heart closed through a clot he did not even know was there. He said he just drifted off to sleep and almost did not wake up again. When Bishop Noel Jones got the phone call about Jakes collapsing on that pulpit, sources close to him say something inside him broke open that had been sealed shut for years. Because Noel knew the schedule. Noel knew the travel. Noel knew the weight of preaching multiple services a week at 74 years old and pretending the body could keep up forever. Noel knew that he himself was running on the same fumes, and Loretta knew it too. Friends of the couple say something shifted in Bishop Noel Jones after he watched his best friend nearly leave the earth in front of a packed sanctuary. Something about looking at Jakes lying in that hospital bed made him look at the woman who had stood beside him for almost 30 years and finally understand what she had been silently asking for the whole time. A promise that if his heart ever gave out the way Jakes's almost did, she would not be reduced to a footnote at his funeral. She would be his wife. Many close to Noel believe his marriage to Loretta was, in part, his answer to a question that comes with age. Was it all worth it? What her confirmation really means. She confirmed that she had not been waiting on him the way the world thought she was. She confirmed that her view of marriage had changed during the long, quiet years of the relationship, not because she stopped believing in covenant, but because she stopped believing she needed it to be valuable. She confirmed that she would have said yes whenever he asked, but she was no longer the woman who would have begged him to ask. And in confirming all of that, she quietly exposed something about Bishop Noel Jones that nobody on Preachers of LA ever managed to pull out of him on camera. She exposed that the weight was never really about her. The weight was about him, about his first marriage falling apart in 1992, about the fear of standing at another altar and watching it collapse a second time, about the public weight of being a bishop whose private life had already been dissected once, about the Stacey Francis story he never addressed, about the friendship with Jakes that nearly ended on a stage in Dallas. The weight was a man slowly working through his own fear in front of a watching world, while the woman beside him quietly built a life that did not depend on whether he ever finished working through it. That is the confession the gospel world missed. That is the part that should change the way every pastor's wife in America hears this story. Loretta did not just get a ring in 2022. She got her own life back, and the man who finally married her did not save her. She had already saved herself. Drop your honest thoughts in the comments and tell me whether Loretta waited too long or whether she got exactly what she was meant to. I will be reading every single one.